Hello, my name is Zachary Holloway, and today I'm going to talk to you about ChemLab Molecular Shapes by VSEPR Theory and Solid State Structures. Firstly, we're going to cover the VSEPR portion of the experiment, so let's start off by seeing how we will be using Lewis structures today to help us determine the VSEPR shape of our given molecules. Here you can see the Lewis structure for CCl4, carbon tetrachloride. Now we're not going to go over how to build Lewis structures in this video because that should be something you already know how to do going into this lab, but just take note, this is the molecule we're going to be modeling with our VSEPR kits.
We take a look at our VSEPR model kit here. We have a lot of different representations of components of molecules. For example, right here we have a representation of shared electrons between atoms, which we know as bonds. That's what all these gray links are. I'm going to take this one right here. You can see we have a sphere here with holes in the surface. So this one has 1, 2, 3, and 4 holes. So this represents atoms that tend to form 4 bonds, such as carbon, which has 4 valence electrons, very well. If you take a look at some of these other ones here, this one, for example, has 6 holes in the surface. It's almost like a cubic shape because it represents atoms that tend to form 6 bonds because they have 6 valence electrons. Then we have these green and white ones right here. These are spheres that only have 1 hole in the surface, so they represent atoms that tend to form only 1 bond really well, such as hydrogen, which only has 1 electron to give away, and halogens, which only need 1 electron to complete their octet. So I tend to associate white with hydrogen and green with halogen, so that's what I'm going to be using going forward, but you can use whichever you prefer. And then finally we have these right here, these little like water droplet shaped pieces. They insert just like these gray rods right here, and these are representative of lone pairs, which are electrons that even though they don't form bonds, they do influence the shape of our molecule because this is VSEPR, which is all about electron repulsion. So these are going to go in the holes just as the bonds do. Alright, so going back to our example that we had earlier with our Lewis structure, we're going to go ahead and build carbon tetrachloride. So like I said, this one represents carbon very well because it has 4 holes to make 4 bonds. So let's go ahead and make that right here. 4 bonds in the surface. And we got 3 and 4. And this makes bonds with the chlorines that we see on the outside, since this is carbon tetrachloride. And like I said, these green ones I like to associate with halogens, so I'm going to do that in this model. Alright, and here you see we have a completed VSEPR model for carbon tetrachloride. Now you can see this looks a lot different than when we had it on paper for the Lewis structure, because once you add that extra dimension, the electrons can spread out a lot farther apart. They don't have to be at 90-degree angles on the paper. Now, to understand what kind of shape this is actually called, you're going to have to look at the table in our instruction manuals for this lab.
Let's take a look at this molecular shape column. The M represents the central atom, the X's represent bonded atoms, and the 2 dots represent lone pairs. All that you need to do is compare your model to this chart and then look at the corresponding text description column to the right. So in our case, we made CCl4, carbon tetrachloride, which has a formula of MX4, so that means that our structure is going to be a tetrahedral structure, as you see in the right column. Let's move on to the second part of our lab, which is solid state structures. But before we get on our solid state kits, I want to review what we're actually going to be looking for in our solid state structures, which is coordination number and total atom number. There are 3 different types of structures we're going to look at in this lab: simple cubic, body-centered cubic, and face-centered cubic. Each of these structures has a coordination number and a total atom number associated with it. First, let's look at what a coordination number is. A coordination number for a solid-state structure is how many atoms the central atom in the structure is touching, or, given no central atom, the number of atoms any one atom is touching. For example, let's take a look at a model for a simple cubic structure.
Alright, so in order to understand what a coordination number is, we're going to have to model our solid-state structures using our solid-state kit here. So if you could see here, we got our atoms and parts of atoms, or our spheres here. We've got these templates in this baggie. We've got 2 square bases, which you insert the rods into. We got the rods right here, and of course we have the all-important instruction manual. So let's go ahead and take a look at that instruction manual. We're going to be building the primitive cubic, which is another name for the simple cubic. So let's go ahead. It says we have template A here with this half circle, so we're also going to need to find the base with that half circle on it. So let's go ahead and find that. We have the half circle base right here, and template A, like it says. And all you have to do is line these half circles up, and you can see that all the holes that you need for this are going to be lined up in this template. So what else does the instruction manual say? Alright, so it shows this shaded region right here, and it says you're going to have to insert 4 rods in this shaded region here. So just take 4 of your rods and insert them in there. Like so. Alright, we got the rods in there. Now, if you take a look at the side part here, it tells you how the layers are going to be built. So it says unit cell layers, half size. So we got layer 1 right here. It's just 4 on these 4 rods. And it also tells you in the bottom that both 1 and 1 repeating, which is going to be the second layer in this case, are all the large colorless ones. So let's go ahead and grab those. 2. 4. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and build the second layer to save time. Alright, so we've repeated the second layer here, and here is our solid state structure for the primitive cubic or simple cubic. Now, if you want to understand the coordination number of this, since this doesn't have a central atom, we're just going to pick one right here. We'll just pick this atom and see how many atoms are touching it. But you're going to have to think outside the box on this one. For example, we got 1, 2, and 3 that are immediately touching this sphere right here. But you have to think outside a single unit cell because you've only constructed 1 unit cell here. So, for example, if you had another one of these to the right, to the front and over, that means you'd also have 1 right here, 1 right here, and 1 right here. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 6 is the coordination number for this structure. Now, I'm not going to build all of these structures for the simple cubic, body center cubic, and face center cubic, because that's going to be your job during this lab. But I will show you how to find the coordination numbers for those using some models that I've constructed. Here you can see I've put together a couple of models to represent the solid state structures of body-centered cubic and face-centered cubic to help you with the coordination numbers for these. And then you're going to actually build the solid state structures using the kit yourself. So on this one, you can actually see this is very simple. This is our body-centered cubic, and this actually has a central atom. So if you want to count the coordination number for this, you just count these corner atoms around it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's going to be your coordination number for the body center is 8. Very simple for this one. Now, this one is probably the hardest out of all of them to imagine. But let's go ahead and this one does not have a central atom. So let's just pick this face one right here. So as you can see, we got these 4 corner atoms, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we also have these 4 face atoms, which are touching right in here. So we got 5, 6, 7, and 8. This is another one that requires you to think outside just one unit cell. So if you imagine you have another unit cell over here, you have this completed atom right here that we're looking at as basically our center, even though we don't have a centric atom. That's just where we're counting from. You could see that when we have the other half here and another unit cell, we're actually going to have more of these face pieces right here surrounding it. So that's going to be 9, 10, 11, and 12 over on this side. So 12 is your coordination number for this one. It's a little bit harder to imagine than the other ones. But if you want, you can actually build a second unit cell using your solid state kits, and it gives you some instructions on how to do it if you'd like, and that might help you imagine a little bit better about coordination numbers. Alright, so the last part of this lab is determining the total atom number, and this is actually one of the easier parts of the lab. So let's go ahead and take a look at this simple cubic structure right here. So you see that this has 8 different atoms that you have all across this solid state structure. But the thing is, you can see that these atoms in this unit cell model that I've constructed are actually sliced in half across 3 different axes. So what you actually have here is something cut in half, in half, in half, which is 1/8. You have 1/8 of an atom in these corner atoms. So let's see, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of an eighth of an atom. So your total atom number for this is going to be 1. You just have 1 atom in total in this unit cell. Now, if you take a look at the body centered, this one's very similar to the simple cubic structure, except it has a entire central atom in here. So you still have these 8 corner atoms, which totals up to 1 atom. But then you also have this whole one in the middle, so that's going to be 2 is your total atom number for this structure. Now, finally, for the face-centered cubic, this one's a little bit different. You still have your 8 corner atoms, which totals up to 1 atom, but then you also have all these face sides right here, and that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because there's one on every side of this cubic unit cell. So that's going to be 6 times 1/2, which is 3, and then you have these 1 from the 8 corner atoms, so your total atom number for this structure is going to be 4.
Alright guys, that's all the information that I have for you in this video. I hope that this helped you understand what both VSEPR theory and solid state structures are and what they mean for the shape of your molecules. So good luck in your lab!